Okay. But enough about Amazon. How did you discover your talent for live theater and performance?
Well, it was a gradual process. I've always been a storyteller. My family are all storytellers, and I grew up in far northern Maine, which has a rich tradition of storytelling. And then I think it was those factors combined with the fact that I was drawn to the traditional theater, and I studied acting and voice and theater, and then also things you wouldn't expect. I did a lot of speech and debate in high school, a lot of extemporaneous speaking, and I became really enchanted with extemporaneous forms. The forms much like the one we're practicing right now, the form of the interview, where I have not scripted my responses, but as I speak them to you, I'm thinking in that moment of what I'm saying. And I increasingly have been very drawn to that process and interested in what happens in a theater and in a room when that's going on. And so it was really all those things together. And I was living in Seattle as a young man, working in garage theater, working much of very, very low rent theaters, which were fantastic because because there's no possibility of making any money. It's actually very clarifying because you only do things that you are compelled to do. It's terrible also, but it's very clarifying. And it was right in that period that I really started looking for the monologues. And when I found the form, when I started doing them in 1997, that was it was a tremendously clear from that moment that this was a form that I had to follow. I tell stories on stage that have multiple threads that weave together, but that the mechanism that lets them be told is the same mechanism that people use every day to tell stories to their family, to their friends, and their coworkers. It's the same machinery. So it's not memorization and it's not improvisation. Instead, it's actually literally that same mechanism that human beings use to tell stories. So, and I feel like that's crucial, to forging connections with the audience, what I'm interested in. And so because it's so recognizable, I think, to people, that's part of the draw, I suspect. In the same way that when you see Bill Cosby, when you see really good stand-up, there's this very recognizable quality. There's a craft and art and intention, but the communication is genuine. And so that's what I'm striving to do. And so when you go to hear one of the shows, when you hear one of the stories, you generally get a complex story with many moving parts, but the intention is for it to be clear and emotive and expressive and connect to other people's lives. And so that's the hope that springs out of the shows.
Great. Well, now, Great Men of Genius is what you're starting out here, and it's a 4-part
Yes.
presentation, right?
Yes.
Well, now, why just great men of genius? What about some of those mediocre men of genius? Are you giving them short shrift here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
So to clarify, they're out of there.
Yes. Yes.
And what about the women? There's no women of genius in your program?
There are none. I'm extremely sexist. And those bitches can take care of themselves. No. It's Great Men of Genius because I was particularly drawn to these 4 specific men. And I really wanted to do it as a quartet. I really wanted to put their lives and my own life woven through the pieces next to each other, because I really felt like these 4 men in particular touched me and really made me think about the nature of megalomania. And while I'm sure there are some women, Leni Riefenstahl, Catherine the Great, there's some women who have megalomaniacal tendencies. The truth is, largely a male affliction. And in particular, these 4 men, I think, really put their hooks into some of the insanity and the desire that are woven around each other that are part of that mixture. And it's a mixture I see in myself as well. And so the reason I speak about these four men is because they are touchstones that resonate for me. I'm sure there are many other people worth talking about. Many other people can do so. I mean, one of the interesting things that the construction of the question makes it sound as though it is a good thing to be in this grouping of great men of genius. Not so entirely, Like genius is not so straightforwardly a positive trait. It's a charged trait. It's a powerful trait, but it's not always peaceful, nor is it always kind or good.
All right. So what comes easier for you, writing or performing?
Performing.
Does it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I find writing unnatural. Because the words, are going out into nowhere. They are emerging onto a page. I don't, write the monologues, so they are performed. They're written as they are performed. Mm-hmm. So, as a consequence, just innately, the performing of the monologues is much more natural to me because there's a communicative process. I also feel it's much easier to be honest performing than it is in writing. I feel like there's a lot more tricks that the mind plays on itself that audiences won't put up with, and so there's a tension there in both directions. Although I do enjoy writing, I enjoy it, and at different times. But I've worked a long time to create work in this way, and as a consequence, it's very clear to me that through performance, through live events, that's when I find my true best self.
Okay. So as long as you're able to continue performing and you find vitality in it, we're probably not going to see another one of your books on Amazon.
Oh, well, we're actually publishing the next book's coming out in the fall. Okay. It's an anthology of the monologues. It's actually 4 of the monologues. The anthology created from transcripts. We've transcribed multiple performances, reconciled them together, and so 4 of the monologues have been sort of preserved in that way, or some record of them has been. So probably there'll be more books in that fashion. And life is long, and I've done a bunch of different things, and I've written screenplays and the books and magazine articles. So I think I will go on writing, because sometimes there are subjects that lend themselves to writing in ways that the theater doesn't afford, or that doesn't make as much sense for me anyway. And so I don't know, I think there's a balance there, my big regret is I think that all the writers should be required to perform. I think that the writing life would be the life of the writer across the country. I think the things they would speak about, and they would speak, right, because they wouldn't just be writing, the things they would speak about in the literary world would expand a great deal if they were required to adhere to the rigor of having an audience in front of them. I think it would be a helpful tension. I'd be really interested, if it was like the old days, like the Romans and the Greeks, and the requirement of oratory to be a learned person, to be creating art. You would naturally also study oratory, and that these things are actually tied to one another. I wish often that was more emphasized, and I think it would be good for the artists of my generation.
Great. So, in regards to the future of mankind, do you consider yourself an optimist, a pessimist, or a realist?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm an optimist. Though most people would be surprised to hear that. I think that the reality of how vicious and cruel human beings are to one another, the reality of how inherently meaningless our lives actually are on a cosmic scale. I think those things for me, are incontrovertible, and I consider myself a reverent atheist, and so I'm a big believer in a lot of the ideas that Camus, used to sell. Like, I think I'm an optimist because, it's the indomitable human spirit that flickers out of even the most extreme, fetid swamp of dog shit, which is what I actually think we live in. And so the fact that I still believe that people can be good, that people can make the right decisions, that even on the right day I can make the right decision. This, I find this startling. I find this startling, and so I try to have faith in humanity instead of giving up on it entirely. And so in my book, oddly, this makes me an optimist.
Great. All right. Do you have a role model in your daily life? And does any one thing or any person inspire you?
A couple of things. I'm very inspired by the idea of my death. I spend a lot of time thinking about my death and how I will pass, and so I find that very inspiring. Like, that really makes me want to make things, and to make things, even though many of those things, since they are performances especially, will pass. When I die, these things will pass with me. But they make me want to fill the silence, of now, with things that I think matter. I'm very, it's very funny. Like, I have different answers at different eras in my life. But the truth is, I've always been bad at role models. Probably the closest thing I have to a role model today is my partner. Because she has many of these traits that I lack, and she's very good at her job, and she's very good at many jobs, and it's inspiring to work with her. And she has a selflessness. She's able to apply herself to this work and really shape it and make it what it is. It takes a huge amount of effort and strain and sacrifice, and I don't think I would be capable of that sacrifice. And we're married, and it's and it reminds me of how marriage is also sort of a continuous sacrifice. And it's possibly I just went to a wedding of a sibling, a second wedding, which in some ways is more. In some ways, it seems almost more important than the first wedding, in a way, because there's a very impressive sort of alchemy of watching someone have been to a wedding already, and then that marriage has failed, and now something new has taken root, and you hope better than the last. And so it's perhaps because of this I'm reflecting on marriage a great deal, but I do think that as role models go, I've always been bad at having role models, but I think that I think my partner really does that for me.
Great. Well, Mike Daisey, thank you so much for speaking with us, and have a great round of performances.
Well, thank you so much. Absolutely.